February, 1945. The volcano awakens. The waters of the Pacific glistened under a pale sun, a deceptive calm masking the inferno that lay ahead. Across the steel decks of the USS Enterprise and 100 other American warships, young Marines leaned against the cold rails, peering at the smudge on the horizon, a desolate, misshapen island, battered by the sea and shrouded in mist. Iwo Jima. At first glance, it hardly seemed worth the price it would demand. Just 8 square miles of volcanic rock, shaped roughly like a pork chop, sitting lonely and defiant between Saipan and Japan. The island steamed under its own heat, the sulfurous soil venting ghostly vapors that drifted across the black sand beaches. To many Marines, it looked like the very antechamber of hell. The smell, a rotten egg stench carried by the ocean breeze, clung to everything: uniforms, rifles, skin. But what they could not see from the decks was what mattered most. Beneath that grim surface lay a fortress the likes of which the Pacific War had never seen. Over months of painstaking preparation, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, a samurai-descended officer of rare insight and grim determination, had transformed Iwo Jima into a subterranean death trap. There were 11 miles of tunnels honeycombing the island, an entire invisible city. These tunnels connected 1,500 rooms, arsenals, ammunition dumps, hospitals, machine gun nests, and artillery positions. Reinforced with steel and concrete, some bunkers could withstand direct hits from naval guns the size of a small house, and within this hidden fortress, 22,000 seasoned Japanese soldiers waited. They were not raw conscripts or green recruits. These men were the hard core of the Imperial Army, veterans blooded in China, Burma, and earlier island defenses. Many were already resigned to their fate, but not to surrender. Kuribayashi had issued orders few Americans could imagine. Every man will resist to the end and make his enemy pay dearly for his life. There would be no glorious banzai charges this time, no reckless, suicidal attacks. Instead, there would be deliberate, coordinated defense from hidden positions, an invisible army designed to bleed the invaders white before the inevitable end. For the Americans, this little volcanic wasteland held enormous value, far beyond the symbolic. By early 1945, B-29 Superfortress bombers were pounding Japan with increasing fury from distant island bases, but many of the massive planes failed to make the long return journey. Damaged by flak, mechanical failures, or fuel shortages, hundreds of bombers and their crews were being lost in the vast Pacific each month, forced to ditch into unforgiving seas. If captured and repaired, Iwo Jima's 3 airfields could serve as an emergency haven for wounded bombers and later as a launch point for fighter escorts, a stepping stone straight toward the Japanese homeland. Strategically, Iwo Jima was a key that could unlock the gates to Tokyo itself. But seizing it would be like storming a furnace. The Navy bombarded the island for days before the invasion, pouring thousands of shells onto the rocky shorelines. Great geysers of black sand and stone erupted under the constant bombardment, and fleet commanders hoped, vainly, that Kuribayashi's defenses would be shattered before the Marines came ashore. In truth, the defenders were largely untouched. Safe deep below ground, they endured the storm of steel in silence, conserving ammunition, studying the bombardment patterns, and preparing their fields of fire. Their weapons, mortars, machine guns, heavy artillery, were positioned with meticulous care, sighted not to repel an initial landing but to cut down the attackers once they pushed inland and thought themselves safe. It would be the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. And for the Marines aboard the invasion fleet, who polished their rifles and penned hurried letters home under the sulfur-tinted sky, the true horror was yet to begin. They could not yet imagine the nightmare that awaited them on those black sands, the 36 days of hell, the staggering casualty lists, the silent figures buried beneath the volcanic ash, or the desperate struggle for survival in a landscape more fitting of Dante than the South Seas. They only knew that they were going ashore, and that they would do their duty. D-Day. The black sand beaches. The morning of February 19th, 1945, broke under a sullen sky as the vast invasion fleet assembled off Iwo Jima. Nearly 500 ships, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, troop transports, and landing craft covered the horizon in every direction, a floating city of war. This was the largest armada the United States Marine Corps had ever assembled, and its purpose was singular: to seize a speck of volcanic rock at the doorstep of Japan, whatever the cost. At exactly 8:30 a.m., the pre-invasion bombardment began anew with a fury that shook the very bones of the earth. Massive 16-inch shells from battleships screamed overhead and slammed into the island with towering eruptions of smoke and black sand. Rocket-firing landing ships loosed their barrages in ripple after ripple, turning parts of the beach into cauldrons of fire. High above, squadrons of carrier-based aircraft dived and roared, unloading bombs that sent mushrooming plumes into the low-hanging clouds. From the decks of the troop ships and the bobbing Higgins boats, the Marines watched in awe as Iwo Jima seemed to dissolve under the hammer blows. Many of them dared to hope. Maybe the Navy had pulverized the defenders. Maybe the landing would be easier than they feared. Young faces, some still smooth and boyish, peered out from under steel helmets as their boats bucked through the choppy surf. Nervous jokes passed among the squads. Cigarettes were lit with trembling hands. Packs were cinched tighter. Rifles were checked and rechecked. The men of the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions had no illusions about war. Many had fought on Saipan, Tinian, or Guam, but nothing, not even the worst Pacific battles, could have prepared them for what awaited them now. As the Higgins boats neared the black, smoking beaches, the order came: "Down ramps!" And hell opened. The first thing the Marines discovered was the sand, deep, loose volcanic ash that gave no purchase. It was like landing in molasses. Men leapt from the boats, only to sink to their knees under the weight of their packs and weapons. Amphibious tanks and tractors that were supposed to climb ashore bogged down helplessly, their treads spinning in the treacherous ash. Forward momentum stalled almost instantly. Confusion reigned. Then, from the silent ridges and hidden bunkers, the enemy guns spoke. Japanese mortars, machine guns, and artillery had waited patiently, holding their fire during the bombardment. Now, with the beach choked with targets, they unleashed a carefully choreographed slaughter. Kuribayashi's defenders had pre-sighted every inch of beach, every likely landing point, and now the precision of their gunnery was horrifying. Shells landed with brutal accuracy, blasting whole squads apart. Mortars rained death on the stationary clumps of Marines struggling to move. Heavy machine guns from pillboxes hidden in the cliffs and ridge lines swept the beach with withering crossfire. Entire landing craft packed with men vanished in great boiling fireballs as artillery shells found their marks. Higgins boats exploded, hurling bodies into the bloody surf. Amtraks burned on the beach, their crews clawing to escape the infernos before secondary explosions blew them apart. The medics, those brave souls whose only weapon was a Red Cross armband, rushed forward into the maelstrom but were overwhelmed almost immediately. Many never reached the wounded they tried to save, cut down before they could offer help. Others dragged broken men behind slight dunes or the smoking wreckage of vehicles, working frantically with what little they could carry. The black beach quickly became a graveyard. Dead and wounded Marines lay everywhere, some half buried in the soft sand, others sprawled in grotesque poses, faces frozen in shock or agony. The tide of battle washed over them without pause, leaving a trail of shattered bodies and burning debris. Private First Class Richard Wheeler, a young rifleman of the 28th Marines, would later describe the moment in simple, searing words. The beach was pandemonium. Men were screaming, bodies were everywhere, and the sand kept sucking us down like it wanted to bury us alive. Every step forward was paid for in blood. Small groups of survivors huddled together, clawing desperately through the ash to create shallow foxholes with their hands and entrenching tools. They fought to gain even a few feet of cover, knowing that staying in the open meant certain death. Officers and NCOs, trying to rally their men, shouted above the din, but their orders were often lost in the thunder of guns. And still, the Marines came ashore. Wave after wave of Higgins boats poured more men onto the killing ground. Reinforcements pushed forward under the covering fire of shipboard guns and the desperate bravery of their comrades. Flamethrower teams and demolition squads struggled to advance, tasked with silencing the hidden bunkers one by one. On Mount Suribachi, the southern volcanic cone that loomed over the beaches, Japanese spotters coolly directed artillery fire, each shot meticulously calculated to sow maximum carnage among the invaders. Yet for all their ferocity, the defenders could not stem the relentless tide. The Marines refused to break. Hours passed like years on that dreadful morning. Inch by inch, they clawed their way off the open beaches, using shell craters, wrecked vehicles, and piles of the dead for cover. Some reached the base of the cliffs. Some found the first Japanese trenches and bunkers and began the grim, brutal work of clearing them out at point-blank range. By day's end, the Marines had secured a tenuous beachhead, but at a staggering cost. Thousands lay dead or wounded, and the worst was yet to come. The black sands of Iwo Jima had claimed their first heavy toll, and they would demand many thousands more before the island's volcanic soil was conquered. In the distance, the setting sun stained the smoke-hazed sky a deep crimson, and the smell of sulfur and blood thickened in the cold air. The battle for Iwo Jima had begun in earnest, and it would be unlike anything the world had ever seen. The bloody crawl inland. The first day had been hell. The second was worse. And by the third, many Marines could no longer tell what day it was at all. From the moment the beachhead was secured, the battle for Iwo Jima became a crawl, yard by agonizing yard, under unrelenting fire, across a landscape so blasted and alien it seemed not of this earth. The volcanic ash that had sucked at their boots on the beaches now mixed with blood and shrapnel, becoming a gray, soupy mire that clung to everything. The sun, when it broke through the smoke, did little to warm the sulphurous air or dry the sweat that ran into their burning eyes. The Japanese defenders, obeying General Kuribayashi's grim orders, refused to die in place. They fought from spider holes, small, cleverly camouflaged pits dug into the ash, invisible until they opened fire at point-blank range. A squad might overrun a ridge or a trench, only to find a swarm of enemy soldiers erupting behind them, machine guns chattering, grenades sailing. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere at once, haunting every blackened crevice, every bomb-blasted hollow. Flamethrower teams, those who carried the terrible fire that could cleanse the pillboxes, became priority targets. Japanese snipers and machine gunners concentrated their fire on them, knowing the threat they posed. Those brave men carrying tanks of volatile fuel on their backs rarely survived long. Many were cut down before they could fire a shot. Others, hit by enemy bullets, erupted into human torches in a flash of horror. Suribachi's shadow. To the south, the 28th Marines pushed relentlessly toward the looming bulk of Mount Suribachi. The mountain dominated the southern tip of the island, and its capture was vital. But the ground between the beach and its base was a maze of death, an intricate network of reinforced concrete pillboxes, buried tanks converted into gun emplacements, and tunnel mouths disguised under rubble. Every step forward was a battle. Squads moved in short, frantic bursts. Dash, hit the dirt, return fire, inch closer. Sometimes they fired point blank into firing ports. Sometimes they rolled grenades into tiny openings and listened for the muffled screams. Japanese soldiers, many half-crazed and desperate, launched savage counterattacks from the tunnel mouths, appearing in the rear of advancing units to wreak havoc before vanishing again into the earth. Night brought no safety. Marines huddled in shallow foxholes or behind shattered rocks, rifles clutched to their chests, while the enemy stalked the darkness. Death came suddenly and often, by bayonet, by grenade, by strangulation. The black volcanic ash drank in the blood and hid the bodies until dawn revealed the night's grim harvest. The meat grinder. To the north, the 4th Marine Division encountered terrain so brutal it earned its own name among the men, the meat grinder. Here, the land was broken and jagged, a chaotic landscape of cliffs, ridges, and twisted rock formations. The enemy exploited every advantage. Machine guns emplaced in caves raked the open ground. Snipers, perfectly camouflaged among the rocks, picked off Marines one by one, methodically, patiently, with the cold precision of a hunter at a shooting gallery. Even the most seasoned veterans found their spirits tested. Every ridge taken revealed another beyond it, higher and deadlier. Mortar shells rained down in a never-ending drumbeat. Mines exploded underfoot. Booby traps hidden under piles of ash tore men apart. The carnage was so constant, so mechanical, that survivors moved like ghosts, almost numb to the horror around them. Banzai in the dark. On the 4th night, under a black, smoke-choked sky, the Japanese launched one of their last great weapons, the Banzai Charge. Nearly 1,000 Japanese soldiers, many wounded, some armed only with bayonets lashed to bamboo poles, rose from their hiding places and hurled themselves screaming at the lines of the 21st Marines. It was a desperate, suicidal assault, a throwback to the earlier battles of the Pacific, when massed charges sometimes overran American positions. But on Iwo Jima, there was nowhere left to run. There would be no retreat, no second attack. The Marines met them with everything they had. Machine guns tore into the oncoming waves. Rifle fire snapped and cracked. Grenades arced through the air. Flamethrowers spat roaring jets of death. But still the enemy came, leaping over the corpses of their comrades, bayonets flashing in the ghostly light of flares and explosions. Soon the battle broke down into savage close-quarters combat. Trenches filled with bodies, and men fought hand to hand, slashing, stabbing, clubbing each other in the darkness. Pistols barked inches from faces. Helmets became weapons. Blood slicked the black ash underfoot, making footing treacherous and turning every step into a nightmare. By dawn, the attack was broken, but the cost was terrible. The 21st Marines held their lines, but hundreds lay dead, friend and foe alike, piled together in grisly heaps. The price of mercy. In the midst of all this horror, men like hospitalman John Bradley, a Navy corpsman attached to the 28th Marines, performed miracles. Working out of makeshift aid stations dug into the ash, Bradley and his fellow medics tended to the endless stream of wounded, many so grievously hurt they had no chance. Supplies ran low. Blood, morphine, bandages, all ran out far too quickly. And yet the work never stopped. Bradley worked 72 hours straight without sleep, ignoring his own exhaustion and terror. He dragged men out of the line of fire. He shielded them with his own body. He comforted them as they died, holding their blood-slick hands, whispering promises he knew he could never keep. Later, when the war was over, when the famous photo of the flag raising on Suribachi turned him into an unwilling symbol, John Bradley would speak rarely of the battle. But once, with tears in his eyes, he said, "I stopped counting how many boys I held as they died. Their last words were always, 'Tell Mom,' but I never got to hear what came next." On the black sands of Iwo Jima, mercy was a miracle. and survival for many was simply a matter of chance. That flag on Suribachi. The climb was brutal. At dawn on February 23, 1945, a 40-man patrol from Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines began ascending the steep, ashen slopes of Mount Suribachi. The volcano, once a place of ancient fire and smoke, was now a fortress riddled with caves, bunkers, and unseen enemies. Every step upward was made under the shadow of death. Japanese snipers hidden in the rocks fired intermittently. Mortar shells crashed around them. The black sand shifted treacherously underfoot. Every man who climbed knew that at any moment a bullet could find him. They climbed anyway. Leading the patrol was First Lieutenant Harold Schreier, carrying a small American flag tucked carefully inside his jacket. It was not a grand banner, just a standard-issue flag that had once flown over a ship's stern. With it, they carried a section of iron pipe, salvaged from the battlefield rubble, to use as a makeshift pole. At 10:20 a.m., after hours of painstaking ascent and clearing pockets of resistance along the way, the Marines reached the summit. Standing amidst the blasted rock with the Pacific stretching blue and vast all around them, they rammed the flag into the earth. As it unfurled in the sulphurous breeze, a great cry rose from the beachhead far below. Across the island, on the battered black sands, in the chaos of the landing zones, among the wreckage of tanks and bodies, Marines stopped fighting for just a moment to look upward. Cheers echoed from foxholes and craters. Men raised their rifles, wept openly, embraced each other with unashamed joy. Out at sea, the fleets of battleships, cruisers, and transports blasted their horns in salute. On the deck of the USS Missouri, Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, watched the small flag flutter against the smoke-streaked sky. Overcome with emotion, he turned to Marine General Holland Smith and declared, "That flag means a Marine Corps for the next 500 years." But the moment of triumph was not as simple as it seemed. Beneath the celebration lay a harsher, grimmer reality, a truth that would be buried for decades under the legend. The small flag raised by Schreier's patrol was not the flag captured in the most famous photograph of the Pacific War. That iconic image, the one the world would know, the one that would immortalize Iwo Jima in granite and bronze, came later. Colonel Chandler Johnson, commander of the 2nd Battalion, wanted the first flag preserved. It was too small, he believed, for the importance of the moment. He sent a runner back up Suribachi's slopes, carrying a second, larger flag, and ordered that it be raised in place of the first. No ceremony, no speeches, just the simple, brutal continuation of a bloody day's work. A second group of Marines, led by Sergeant Michael Strank and including Corporal Harlan Block, Private First Class Franklin Sousley, Private First Class Rene Gagnon, Private First Class Ira Hayes, and Navy Corpsman John Bradley, carried the larger flag and a heavier length of pipe. As they struggled to raise it atop the volcano's summit, Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal captured the moment with his speed graphic camera. The photo, 6 men straining together, muscles taut, bodies bent against the wind, became an instant symbol of American resilience, sacrifice, and unity. It was reproduced in newspapers around the world within days. War bond drives used it to raise millions. Sculptors later turned it into the massive Marine Corps War Memorial near Arlington, Virginia. But the price of that image was steep. 3 of the 6 men captured in the photograph, Strank, Block, and Sousley, would be dead within days, killed in the savage fighting that still raged across Iwo Jima. The survivors, including Hayes and Bradley, would live with the burden of being turned into national heroes, while their comrades' bodies rotted under the black volcanic sand. The battle for Iwo Jima was far from over. In fact, the bloodiest weeks still lay ahead. Mount Suribachi was just the beginning. The Japanese strongholds to the north, Places with grim names like the Meat Grinder and Death Valley would consume thousands more American lives before the island was finally declared secured. Colonel Johnson, a veteran of many hard fights, had no illusions about the meaning of the flag on Suribachi. When a junior officer, flushed with excitement, burst into his command post, shouting about the flag raising, Johnson merely growled, "The only thing that flag means is we got a bigger piece of pipe up there than the Japs did." For the Marines bleeding and dying in the rocky gullies and on the open fields below, the flag was not an end, but a beginning, a marker of a battle still being fought inch by inch, body by body. In the decades that followed, the image of the flag raising would be polished, mythologized, enshrined in stone. It became a symbol of courage, of sacrifice, of victory bought at terrible cost. But those who were there, those who climbed the mountain, who dug into the black ash, who fought for their lives and their brothers, knew the truth. On Iwo Jima, glory was paid for in blood. And the flag that flew over Suribachi did not signal the end of the war. It simply waved over another battlefield where the killing had not yet stopped. The killing fields. Week after week. The 5-day operation stretched into 36 days of relentless combat. In the north, Marines encountered the Turkey Knob, a fortress of interconnected caves requiring satchel charges and bulldozers to seal the amphitheater, a natural bowl where Japanese gunners had overlapping fields of fire, bloody gorge. The final defensive line where Kuribayashi made his last stand. New replacements arrived daily, wide-eyed boys who often died within hours. Veterans developed the Iwo Jima stare, hollow, eyed men who'd seen too much. PFC Dave Severance of Easy Company recalled, "We stopped learning names. You'd share your foxhole with a guy at dusk, and by dawn he'd be gone." On March 26, 1945, after nearly 5 weeks of fighting, Iwo Jima was declared secure. The cost was staggering. 6,821 Marines and sailors killed, nearly one every 90 seconds at the battle's peak. 19,217 wounded. Only 216 Japanese prisoners taken out of 22,000 defenders. The strategic value proved immense. Over 2,400 B-29s made emergency landings. An estimated 24,000 aircrew lives saved a vital base for P-51 escorts to Japan, but for the survivors, the numbers meant little. As Medal of Honor recipient Woody Williams put it, "When I close my eyes, I still see the faces of the boys we left in that sand." The legacy in living memory. Today, the iconic flag raising symbolizes American resolve, but the full story runs deeper. The unbreakable bond. Survivors formed lifelong connections, meeting annually until their final days. The forgotten heroes, Navajo code talkers, African-American ammunition runners, and corpsmen who crawled through fire. The weight of memory. Every year, more sand from Iwo is returned to families, grains clinging to letters and dog tags recovered decades later. For those who remember 1945, this isn't just history. It's the defining moment of their generation. As we lose these veterans, the last surviving flag raiser passed in 2022, their lesson endures. Freedom is never given, only earned by those willing to pay the price.